Welcome to the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can find me at Ethan J. Skolnick or at 5 Reasons Sports on Twitter. We're going to get to one of the big issues facing the Miami Heat this upcoming training camp and season. But before we do, at the end of a hard week, it's great to sit down, take some time off, and watch some football, game-winning touchdowns, 2-minute drives, running backs racing down the sidelines against the Dolphins with no one to stop them. There's nothing else like the NFL, unless you're a Dolphins fan, and there's no better way to make the games even more exciting than to bet on them. So do the smart thing. Go to mybookie.ag. That's mybookie.ag on the internet. No one gives you more ways to win than they do. MyBookie's got the fastest payouts, better lines than any sports book. Go check out. I think the Dolphins right now are 20.5-point underdogs against the Cowboys. Don't forget, where you're betting is just as important as who you're betting on, and mybookie.ag is the best in the business. You definitely should go play there. So check them out. And if you want to try to bet a little and win a lot, try a parlay. If all your picks come through, you multiply your winnings. No matter how you bet, the NFL season is the best time of year until the NBA season starts, and then you can bet on NBA games too. Join now. MyBookie will double your first deposit. So use the promo code 5, F-I-V-E, that's F-I-V-E, to activate that offer. Double your deposit. Visit mybookie.ag today. And now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back here. And what we've been doing here as the Miami Heat are about to start training camp coming up, they have media day on the last day of September, and then training camp starts up in West Palm Beach at Kaiser University from October 1st to the 5th, and a scrimmage that's open to the public on October 6th. We'll all be there, all three of us, at that scrimmage. I'm Ethan Skolnick. I'm here today with my usual co-host, Alphonse Sidney. You can find him at Alf954. And also Alex Toledo, who will be helping us out, covering events for us, and also helping to produce the podcast and sometimes appearing with us as he does today. So in our first of 5 episodes, we covered the point guard situation. Goran Dragic, Justice Winslow, how should that play out? Justice Winslow's recent comments about wanting to be the point guard. It's one of the big issues of camp. Here's another issue of camp. Is Jimmy Butler a true number one on a contending team? Now, we're not going to find that out in training camp necessarily or in the preseason games. We're going to get a sense of how he deals with other players on the roster. We're going to get a sense of his personality here in Miami, which we haven't been able to do because he hasn't had a press conference because he was overseas. He's overseas as we speak, I think, because he was actually at Camp Nou at the field in Barcelona. Someone joked that he got a Barcelona jersey before he got a Heat jersey because he hasn't had a press conference yet. But I'm going to start here with that was you. Actually, it was Alex we brought up on the podcast. All right, so you know what? Screw Alf. We're going to start with Alex on the podcast. Jimmy Butler was just ranked the number 11 player in the NBA by SI.com. To me, that means he's a number one because that means he would be a number one on a playoff team. If there's 16 playoff teams, he was rated the 11th best player in the league. There's a couple of teams that have a couple of guys on that list, including the Lakers, obviously, with LeBron and AD. Is Jimmy Butler, in your view, a number one on a contending team, Alex?
So if you're talking about a playoff team, like you said, I think he's a fine number one. Like we talked about, he's a top 15 player. Where that lies, it varies between who you ask. But I think he's a great player. I think he's somebody who can, handle the load when it comes to shot creation, playmaking, scoring. But, I think most people would agree that he's not a number one on a contending team in this context of the NBA that we're in right now, where you see teams like the Lakers, Clippers stacking up 2 all-stars. You got the Rockets, the Warriors, the Bucks, the Sixers. All of these teams are immensely more talented than the Heat, and I think it's to no fault of Jimmy's, but they probably got to pair him with somebody else.
Alf, where do you come down on this?
I'm the same way. I think he's a number one. I don't know, it's hard, right? He's a number one on a playoff team. He's not a number one on a title contending team. But I think he's like a 1A or 1B, right? I think he's not going to do for the Raptors what Kawhi Leonard just did. He's not going to do for the Cavs what LeBron did, taking them to the finals with Mo Williams as a second best player. That is not Jimmy Butler. What Jimmy Butler is going to do is that if you put another strong 1A, 1B type player around him, Jimmy Butler is going to give you that extra edge in the final 30 seconds of a game to get you a lot of close wins. Like, he's such a really good clutch player. But for like 48 minutes, there's times that Jimmy Butler, as good as he is, as much as I like him, disappears as far as his impact on the game, right? So like the last 30 seconds, the last minute of a game, last 2 minutes, Jimmy Butler's excellent, but he's not that guy that carry the load for 48 minutes for 82 games. He's just not that overwhelming, overpowering of a player. He's not LeBron. He's not Kevin Durant. He's not, like I say, he's not Kawhi. But if he's on a good team and it's a close game in the last minute, Jimmy Butler, yes, he's definitely the alpha, but getting there is the problem.
So let's look at the Heat's history a little bit. If we're going to say that Jimmy Butler is a top 15 player, again, SI put him at number 11. They put him ahead of Kyrie, which I thought was interesting. But they had him at number 11. I don't think you can really argue that he's ahead of any of the top 10 guys. Okay, if you go through their top 10, it's hard to really quarrel with any of that. So if you have him at number 11, let's look through the Heat's history a little bit and see when they've had a player who's been a top, say, 12 player in the NBA. I think you go to the pre-Riley years, and I don't think they ever had one. I think Glenn Rice was probably the best player that they had during that stretch. Maybe it was Steve Smith, but never at that level. Alonzo Mourning, and I'm going to go, Alf's a little older here than Alex, so I'll go to him. There was one year that I think Zoe was second in the MVP voting, the year before he got sick, right? Like, he was second in the MVP voting to Karl Malone, I think. And there were some people who thought that Zoe could have won the award. I mean, he had that kind of season. I covered that team on the road, so I was around Zoe a lot that year. He was clearly a top 5 all-around player in the league, offense and defense. I don't think for most of his career here in Miami, though, he was. Alf, would you agree? Was he ever? I mean,
for 3-4 years, I would agree with that.
Right. I'd like, even during, if you look at the late 90s years, was obviously, they got they got some number 1 seeds in there. We know they lost the Knicks 3 out of 4 years. But I think that Zoe was considered to be a top 5 center, probably, right? Like
top 3, probably.
Yeah, I think
that's hard. That's hard because you're actually looking at the tail end of some of these guys, or some of the greats.
Mm-hmm.
Late 90s, you're looking at the tail end of the Ewing, Olajuwon,
Robinson.
But then there was Shaq. It was a tail end of the Ewing, Olajuwon, Robinson, but the dawn of the Shaq, and it was Shaq. To me, it was Shaq and Mourning for like 3 years.
Right. Well, Zoe was the second pick in that draft behind Shaq. I mean, 92. So I think he was close some years. I don't think Tim was ever a top 12 player while he was here in Miami. He was an all-star. He was kind of –
to me, from 96 to 99 is where you can make that biggest case for Zoe, right?
Right. So they might have had it then. Then obviously 2000, 2001, 2002, they didn't. 2003, Dwayne's rookie year, they didn't. And then 2004, 2005, Shaq was a top 12 player that year, that first year. I mean, it could have been the MVP. Dwayne was pretty damn close that first year.
Dwayne was.
I think so too. 05, 06.
Top 12 players that year. That's
right. I think 2 straight years, right? I think it's fair to say, right? 2 straight
years. But that's why I think Shaq was a better player in 2004, 2005, and that's why I will always contend that was a better team than the one that won the title.
Oh, it was a better team. I think so too. I mean, even if we get past Damon Jones being the point guard, I think it was a better fitting team. The 06 team just got hot because Dwayne put it on everything fit because it went on his back. They talk about 15 strong, and it's cute with the cards, and I still have some of those, and they're doused in champagne. But the reality is, that Dwayne put that team on his back. And then Zoe had a moment in Game 6, and Shaq was a great decoy, and they had some other guys kind of fill in and behave for a little while. But I agree with the first he was better. But I guess my point is, even if you look at 06, 07, where I don't think Dwayne had as good a year. 07, 08, we've talked about that year. That was a disaster for everybody. Dwayne was not healthy enough to be a top 12 player that year. He certainly was 08 to 2010. I don't think he was during the Big 3 era necessarily. First
yeah. Wait. Dwayne wasn't a top 12 player in the Big 3 era?
The first year he was. I don't think he was healthy enough. I think we could look at Alex. Would you? Now we're moving more into your territory here. Second year of the Big Three era, was Dwayne? Would you say a top 12 player? He was a top 20 player. Would you say he was a top 12?
Definitely.
You think so?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was, that was the first we started to see some decline. The year before, he was at the top of his game, putting up, 26 on great shooting percentages in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first year we started to see some decline. I think top 12 is more than fair.
Yeah, well, he would have been the MVP that first year. So, and obviously LeBron was during that stage, and I think you can make a case at some points Bosh was also. But since LeBron left, fair to say the Heat have not had a top 20 player since LeBron left?
Yeah,
No,
pretty much.
It's hard to say because Chris finished those 2 years.
Right.
The beginning of both of the seasons after yeah, they had a top 20 player. At the end of the season, no, they didn't.
Well, I think the issue with Chris, it wasn't just the staying healthy, it was sort of a consistency thing with him too. But you're right. They were trying to play through Chris as their number one option. And then obviously that didn't end up working out when he got the blood clots twice. But I guess the overall point is, like, we think of the Heat as being this star-studded organization, and they have been, right? You've got, they got Shaq, they got Zoe, they got Timmy, they got Gary Payton at the end of his career, they got Ray Allen at the end of his career, they got, obviously Dwayne for, I like to think of it as the entirety of his career because I don't like to think about Chicago and Cleveland. They had Chris Bosh. But really, they've gone through some stretches where they haven't necessarily had two great lead guys or even one great lead guy. And I guess this is beyond the on-court stuff and the off-court stuff, which we've covered a bit on some of those Buckets Backstory podcasts, which you should check out in our library. One of the other questions I have for you guys is, I always felt that after LeBron left and also after Dwayne declined, that this market would have a hard time embracing another star because they were so spoiled. Like, you saw the greatest player arguably in basketball history, certainly one of the top two, in his absolute prime, playing his best ever season, in my view, 2012, 2013, in a Heat uniform. And then you also had a guy in Dwayne Wade who played at a level that only two other two guards in history have ever gotten to. I always wondered whether the Heat fan would embrace another star, but I kind of feel like it's been down long enough at this point that they will. How do you think that Heat fans will react to Jimmy Butler? Alf, you start.
I think you're right. I think if Jimmy Butler was a consolation prize for consolation prize for LeBron leaving, I think that would have been a letdown, right? That was like, when you bring in Luol Deng and give Bosh a max contract, a lot of Heat fans were down about that. It wasn't really, you bring in Danny Granger and stuff like that. And I'm not comparing Jimmy Butler at this stage to Luol Deng or Danny Granger. What I'm saying is the letdown from LeBron was steep and precipitous, right? So there was very few players in the league that would have made up for losing LeBron. So now you fast forward 4 or 5 years from there, and where you're rooting for Dwayne Wade on his way out. You're rooting for Chris Bosh to not have blood clots. You're rooting for Goran Dragic to lead a team of journeymen. You're getting attached to guys like Justice Winslow and Bam Adebayo, promising young players. Right now, Jimmy Butler is a breath of fresh air to this Heat fan base because they've had so little to really rally behind. And so, right now, Jimmy Butler as the face of your franchise to a Heat fan base that's been starving for a star, where your only all-star in the last few years has been Goran Dragic, and that's after like 4 different players dropped out. Yeah, right now, Jimmy is it. And then also Jimmy, he does have the pedigree as well. So it's not like we're just attaching to any old star you brought in. This is a guy that, we can actually really believe in.
See, so I completely agree with Alf. I think Jimmy, between the personality, somebody with that type of attitude, he fits everything that the Heat want when it comes to the type of star that I think that people are 100% going to embrace him. I think the team, being that they're going to be, I don't know, let's say somewhere around 45, 46 wins, they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to be fun. They're going to be fun to watch with Jimmy there leading the helm. I think it's a perfect situation in that part. And I think the one thing that gets, Heat fans more excited again, besides the part of, being relevant again, is also the prospect of possibly, getting a second star and that hope there. So I think, it's like killing two birds with one stone when it comes to Jimmy Butler, because it keeps the hope alive in the short term and the long term.
So let's look at his other two situations, or other three situations. And we've had people on the podcast from all three places, from Wolves, we actually had three people on who covered him with the Bulls, and then obviously with the Sixers. And let's get into kind of what was learned about him from each. He starts in Chicago as basically a six-man, or even further back, on very good teams. Plays behind Luol Deng, establishes himself as a backcourt partner to Derrick Rose, emerges in a way that I don't think the organization expected him to as the number 30 overall pick, and then also has a personality that sort of doesn't allow himself to take a back seat. And then he and Rose have some issues that kind of got talked about. He and Noah had some issues that didn't get talked about quite as much. And then obviously that team blows up. Jimmy's left as sort of the lone star. Dwayne comes in. Then he goes to Minnesota. He's playing with Towns, who is arguably more talented than him and was the number 1 overall pick, but doesn't seem to have the edge that Jimmy does, and that didn't seem to work very well, especially with Wiggins. But that first year, that team was really good, and Jimmy Butler was kind of a dark horse MVP candidate as a number 1/2, and then he goes to Philadelphia, supposed to be the 3, and turns into the 1 in the playoffs. Alex, what did we learn about him in those 3 situations, and what is the best situation for him?
So when you're talking about all 3 situations, referring to what you were just talking about with Philadelphia, I think he really showed out as the number 1 guy throughout the playoff run there, especially towards the end. They almost beat the eventual champs. It's something that's been mentioned before, but this guy is for real. When it comes down to it, this is, he's one of the guys that you want with the ball in his hands. And he's somebody that affects winning on both ends of the floor. It's somebody that you can constantly depend on. So the Heat have him in a pretty ideal role. I think the more ideal role would be having him alongside another star of his caliber, maybe somebody that doesn't demand the ball as much, maybe Bradley Beal. But throughout all 3, I think the theme is, he just demands a lot from his teammates. He wants the hard work to be put in. He doesn't want people to, shy away from the intensity, shy away from the work, shy away from him when he starts calling teammates out. And I think that's probably why UD was kept onto the roster, to help kind of be that middle ground between him and the players, because now he's going to have to jump in and be this leader. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because he's now, being forced into this number 1 spot, and we haven't seen that in about 3 or 4 years. But I'm excited to see how it turns out.
Alf, what's his ideal role?
His ideal role is exactly where he's at, right? He's able to be the alpha on a team of guys who, okay, and this might sound bad, and I apologize to all the Sixer fans and the T-Wolf fans and the Bulls fans, but ain't no bitch in the Miami Heat, right? As a franchise, the franchise is not bitch made. And the problem is with some of these other franchises, you had these little prima donna, like, super sensitive rookies and young guys who, Karl Anthony Towns, Bam Adebayo ain't gonna be. He's not gonna be offended when Jimmy Butler wants more out of him. Justice Winslow is not gonna be offended because Jimmy Butler, challenges him in practice. He's not gonna run to Adrian Wojnarowski or whoever or Barry Jackson, whoever the reporter is around at the time, and complain about how rough. Can you imagine on a Miami Heat team, somebody complaining that players is being too rough on them? Are you kidding me? That it just does not fit within this franchise. So with Jimmy Butler's in the perfect situation because he has a bunch of guys around him that not only can take what he's dishing out, they've been taking it from this coaching staff for 3-4 years already. Like this, the standard that Jimmy Butler is bringing within himself to the Miami Heat has already been instilled in this franchise for years. So there's nothing Jimmy Butler can say in practice that these motherfuckers haven't heard from Udonis Haslem already. So that's the thing. Like, I just feel like Jimmy's in this perfect situation. And I know Dwayne Wade told him this before he got here. So there's a reason Jimmy Butler wanted to be here, because he's going to be surrounded by young guys who are not only going to take the criticism, and they're probably going to give it right back to Jimmy the same way. I don't see Justice Winslow afraid to talk back to Jimmy Butler. I don't see Bam Adebayo afraid to talk back. You know, I don't see that within this franchise. I don't see Eric Spoelstra afraid of his superstar, because probably the only head coach that has ever talked back and stepped up to LeBron is Eric Spoelstra. And if he can do that with LeBron James at the peak of his powers, you think he's afraid of Jimmy Butler? He's not. And I think all of these guys thrive on this, right? They thrive on that tension. Like, it's what they want. Like, I think Eric Spoelstra wants to be challenged. I think Jimmy Butler wants to be challenged, and they want a challenge of the people. So I think Jimmy's in the perfect place. And like Alex is saying, really I think they're going to be really good this year. I think they're going to be high 40s. I think if everything breaks right, they'll be at 50, the amount of wins. But he's going to need that second complimentary superstar or all-star, whatever you want, or that 1A, 1B. But for right now, Jimmy's in the perfect situation.
All right, we're going to get in a second to where Jimmy can improve as a basketball player, because we've talked a lot on all these podcasts about him as a personality. We want to close with that. But first, if you're looking to buy or sell a vehicle, AutoNation is where you want to go. They're the largest auto retailer from coast to coast, and their friendly, knowledgeable staff here in South Florida will help you save big on a huge selection of new cars, trucks, and SUVs, Toyota, Honda, Chevrolet, Mercedes, and much, much more. And if you're looking to buy pre-owned, shop AutoNation's huge selection of one-price pre-owned vehicles, all clearly marked with one price, their lowest price guaranteed. Or you want to just get rid of that old car, turn it into cash today, get a top dollar offer and a check the very same day. They'll buy your car with no purchase necessary. Check engine light on right now. Get the services you need at low AutoNation prices. Go to AutoNation.com to schedule your appointment today. Here's the biggest thing to take away from this spot. If you're in the market for a new car, you got to DM at 5 Reasons Sports. That's at 5 Reasons Sports. We had a couple people do this already, had a great experience. I will give an AutoNation senior manager your information. They will reach out to you directly and walk you through the buying or leasing process. So DM me at 5 Reasons Sports. All right, we'll get the last part of our second episode here of the 5 issues facing the Miami Heat as they enter training camp. And this is just simply Jimmy as a basketball player, you know, and that's, again, he's been ranked number 11 by SI.com. I figure, you know, NBA TV does one of these, ESPN does one of these, CBS does one of these. I figure Jimmy will be somewhere between 11 and probably 16 or 17 in all of those. So there's not a lot of improvement he needs to make. The one place that I always go to, because this is a guy who's played a lot of minutes for Tom Thibodeau and for others. He's played a ton of minutes, and as you age, we saw it with Dwayne Wade. Even he tried it. Didn't work out quite so well on a consistent basis. But as you age, you move a little further from the basket. It's a little harder to get to the places you want to get to on the floor, and you need to become a better three-point shooter. If Jimmy Butler could I don't want him taking high volume from there, but if he can just get to 34, 35%, to me, that's the biggest area of growth in his game. Alf, where do you think Jimmy can still grow as a player?
I think he'll grow. I think because of the way the team is set up, he's going to have a lot of open three-point shots. Just because he's going to have other guys on the floor that are going to get to the rim, break down the defense, and kick it out. And he's going to have to improve as a three-point shooter. But what I also and I don't know if it's going to improve. I just think it's going to be incumbent upon him is to also be that guy for other guys, right? Where he's going to need to be able to recognize and see the floor and be that shot creator for other guys. He's going to have to if you look at the way that Justice has progressed as a spot-up shooter, how Dion Waiters ended the year as a great spot – not great, but as a better spot-up shooter. Tyler Hero, Myers Leonard, Kelly Olynyk, all these guys that are really good spot-up shooters in space, Jimmy Butler's going to have to take advantage of that. And he's a good passer, but I think if he wants to be an alpha of a team, if he wants to carry a team and he wants to be the main guy, one of the things he's going to have to do is buy into the kind of things that Dwayne Wade used to do. where, yes, I am the best player on this team and I could drop 40 every single night, but that's not going to lead to wins. I have to get my other guys involved. And as long as he's on that wavelength, I think he's going to have a successful season.
Alex, where do you come down from a basketball perspective?
So it's interesting. When it comes to Jimmy, I agree with some of what you're saying. I think as he gets older, he's going to have a more steady diet when it comes to his shot profile. He's going to have to improve on the volume and the percentage when it comes to three-point shooting. But also, he needs to take advantage of one of his greatest specialties on offense is getting to the mid-range, getting to that shot there, and being able to balance all three levels and be a true three-level scorer. On top of that, I would like to see the Heat run more of a movement-based offense, even when Jimmy does have the ball in his hands. I think that's the way to really maximize the offense so that you don't have guys, Justice and Goran just standing around shooting for threes. There should be people screening, cutting, moving all over the place to really get that offense going because as we talked about earlier, they only have the one star to create and generate shots. I would like to see there be, let's say 50% Jimmy, and then you've got the other 50% is guys moving around and trying to get open.
I think the thing that Eric Spoelstra does better than anything else as a coach is finds the places, and this is offensively, because I still think he's a better defensive coach than an offensive coach. But I think offensively what he does is he finds the places where guys can be more efficient. And we talked on this podcast about, Alf talked about, how he was able to reach LeBron. That's how he reached LeBron. I mean, and LeBron, and he used Shane Battier a little bit to do it, but when LeBron was reading charts that he was not reading before, and that's also how he almost got Durant down here, which I almost is a strong word because the Heat were never in position from a cap situation or a talent situation to really get KD. But the thing that impressed KD the most was Eric talking about the ways that he can improve his efficiency similarly to the way that LeBron did. I think that the biggest place, I talked about the three-point shooting, and hopefully that gets a little bit better. And maybe it's spots on the floor that Jimmy can be more effective from three. But I think the biggest thing that we're going to see Jimmy grow as an offensive player, I think he's a very good defender. He's going to be a really good defender in this system. But where he can become better offensively is, like you talked about, Alex, is shot profile. I think that's what they're going to work with him the most on. I think the other thing that the Heat's really good at is working on guys' balance. I remember having a lot of conversations with LeBron about that was an issue for LeBron when he came here, and it got much better as he went forward. I would not be surprised if you see healthy 2 to 3% jumps in Jimmy's overall field goal percentage and in his three-point percentage simply because he'll be taking shots from better places. I think that that's going to be a key focus of this team. And I think the only thing that holds that back is the lack of shooters around him. If Harrow can emerge as a legitimate rotation player or even a starter, if Waiters can play consistently and shoot 35 to 37% from three, and Olynyk gets back in the rhythm he got 2 years ago, and you got Myers Leonard in there too, they might have enough shooting to allow Jimmy to find those spots. To me, that's the biggest thing for them this season. All right, we'll have 3 more episodes coming up. We're going to cover rebounding and interior defense. We're also going to cover who might be sort of the second star with Jimmy going forward. And there's one more topic that we'll think of as we go forward, or I forgot. But check out other episodes of 5 on the Floor. Of course, check out all the podcasts in our network, 3 Yards Per Carry, Fish Tank, Light Skinned Opinions, Mark Your Territory, Fantasy on 5. They're always upset that I don't mention them. Ballscast, of course, if you want to laugh on a Friday. Check it all out. Just type in 5 Reasons Sports into your favorite podcast provider, and we'll talk to you soon.